Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Hello and welcome to this Battlemech overview. Today we are going to look at one of the original Battlemech to ever be produced, the Banshee. It's in that group of like 2-3 original mechs, really at the very start of the new armored warfare era. It went from being okay to being a derided machine for the longest time. For about 500 years, actually, it was not very well regarded, to actually being one of the most popular assault mech, at least for a portion of the inner sphere nowadays. The Banshee has a long and storied history, and it has its own jokes associated with it, let's say, really depending on which era you look at the machine from. So let's get into it.
Brawling ain't free. Going fast and proper punching gotta be taken with the weight of a 41-ton GM380. BNC-3S, aka the good one, is not a proper Banshee. It is overcompensating and overheats like crazy. Punching and shooting, not scooting and shooting. Praise Blake.
Those were the words of renowned Solaris jock Stefan Amaris. You can't see my air quotes here. The guy was a oddball in the early 31st century, piloting a Banshee in the ring. He was playing the role of a descendant of Stefan Amaris, the person we all know and love, and he did it really well. He was perfectly hateable. He had a face that anybody could hate and an attitude to match, but he really loved his original Banshee that he further modified as time went on. It ended up closer to a 3P, then it had triple strength myomer, and then he retired. An happy and old man, his Banshee passing to his son. The Banshee came out about 6 years after the original Mackie, and it was supposed to be another one of those cutting-edge technology design, a bit similar to the Emperor, which came out in 2442. Those early assault mechs really all feel and fell in the same category here. Basically, it was a case of, well, let's build it, then we'll figure what we can actually do with them as we go on. The Banshee was in the middle of the pack. It was 95 tons. The Mackie was at 100. The Emperor was at 90. Each of them were testing different thing. They were really test bed machines, some of them surviving longer than the others. As the original mech walked off the production yard, there was no real yardstick. There were no support mechs. There were no light mechs to give scouting details to. There was nothing unusual about them. The one thing you need to know, though, is that the Banshee was the first mech, at least first battle mech, to have a fully functional and assembly, and was actually quite dexterous. Yes, it's a 95-ton piece of metal, and if it picks something up, it'll probably crush it, but it's much more capable than you would expect just a robot to be. With the proper link to your neuro helmet, you have about the same dexterity as if you were wearing, one of those big gloves when trying to pick things up with your mechs, and it's very nice in the long run. So the first Banshee is really the primitive BNC-1E, which was 95 tons, went around 54 kilometers per hour, so the same speed as the others, using a GM345, which was decent enough at the time. If you start looking, of course, you're going to think that this engine is way too big for the power output it gives. Mech transmissions, basically, were not good enough at the time. You needed a larger engine to provide power for the entire machine. It got refined fairly quickly, but those early mechs all have larger engines and they need to. It was defended by 22 tons of primitive armor, which is about equivalent to 14.5 tons of modern armor, but that was more than the Mackie, which was 5 tons heavier. As far as weapons, it had a PPC from Magna L-Star, an Imperator A5 class autocannon, a pair of medium lasers, and a small lasers, all of them from Magna. Compared to the Mackie and the Emperor, it was actually easier to maintain and used more basic standard part. It was Apparently a lot more fun to work on than the other two. For the techs and the engineers, the leg assembly was easier to take off and put back in. The gyro was better balanced. A lot of advantages the other two didn't have, as they were far more experimental, let's say. And it's kind of at that point that things got a little bit weird. There was evolution in Battlemech technology. Those engines were actually being able to be reduced in size by about 20% for most machines. The cockpits were getting a bit lighter. The gyro was getting a bit more sturdy. Everything kind of went better. So rather than continuing in the same line as the other standard assault mech, when the full evolution came through, Defiance went in a different direction for this machine, just so they could try something else. So they decided to make the Banshee a fast assault. So in 2475, they came out with the BNC-3E. There's a 2E somewhere that was probably an in-betweener that we don't really know about. But what they did was stick a GM380 engine, which is 41 tons of engine in the new Banshee, giving it a top speed of 65 kilometers per hour, which was faster than the other two assault mechs. It also had 15 tons of standard armor, so it was better protected than your primitive Banshee, and it was able to get into scraps with other mechs fairly decently. The problem comes when you start looking at the weapons of that 3E series. You keep both the PPC and the AC-5 and their minimum range because they're not very efficient at close range, unfortunately. And when something gets close, well, you still have a small laser, and that's it. For a mech that's meant to be brawling, basically getting into people's face and punching them, it's not the best possible setup. It has some issues, but the machine itself is still functional. Really, while it was functional, it was coming at a time where there were starting to be a lot more modern mechs and a lot more different designs. The Banshee didn't suffer from eat issues with 16 heat sinks. That's more than enough to compensate for everything that you would do with it. And it was tough, so it could get in and punch people and kick people and do all sorts of things. But there were now better options coming out of factories throughout the inner sphere, especially in the heavy mech range. Things like the Battle Axe, things like the Orion, or even the Archer, all add more specific roles, similar kind of speed, and were also quite efficient at doing more things than a Banshee could really do. The production run came for about 10 years, and 5,000 units were delivered, but Defiance kind of shuttered the line after that because all the Banshees that they were delivering were being sent to militia units, where they actually served very well. They were very decent machines in these kinds of roles, but they were not meant to be frontline machines. They were not going to sell a whole lot of them, and they were not going to sell a whole lot of repair kits for them. Ausmeric was smart with a lot of the machines that they did receive, and they changed the standard from the 3E to the 3M, which replaces the AC-5 with another PPC and adds 2 medium lasers. That's a design that came in 2579, so about 100 years after the machine stopped production. I am pretty sure that if Ausmeric had greased the wheel a little bit more, this could have become a standard for the Banshee, and we would see a lot more machines in that same range, let's say. So during the Succession War era, the Banshee served admirably just about everywhere, mainly in Aussteiner and Ausmeric, but everybody had a few of them running around. Even with the original full production run being quite limited, most of them survived the roughest bit of the Succession War because they were not on the front lines. And there were new machines trickling in when Defiance could afford to build 1 or 2, or when someone actually went around and said like, yeah, we need a new company of Banshees to refill 12 militias out in the boondocks. So the design remained in the hands of Aussteiner because Defiance were the one building it, and they were the one mainly getting the repair kits and everything for just about everyone. Ausmeric then make another version, the 3Q, which packs an AC-20. It's kind of silly. It does work, but it's just one of those odd, not one-off, but almost. There were tons of individual versions, people in militias, especially the ones that were running it as a family business, basically, had those things floating around for forever, so you had techs refitting them with just about everything. Some of them stripping the PPC, some of them stripping the AC5, some of them taking off some of the heat-sinks. I've seen all sorts of things, both in battle ROMs and in actual Banshees that walked into the factory here. As we stated, Defiance had a production line. They had the specs, they had the design notes for the Banshee. They knew how the darn thing worked, but they weren't making much money off of it. During the Succession War, this was kind of an affront, especially since everybody was asking for new machines. So at this point, in 3026, they just decided to go F it and start the production of the 3S series. First off, they took out the engine and put a more sensible, I'll put air quotes around it before Mr. Ramirez punches me, Bitband 285, which slowed down the 3S to a more reasonable 54 kilometers per hour or so, but allowed it to have a massive payload. You get 2 PPC, the original L-Star, and a Donald PPC in the arm, which no longer has the fist. It's replaced with an actual arm. It's closer to the assembly you have in like a Warhammer. And the Imperator A is replaced with an Imperator B, which is a 10 class autocannon instead. At closer range, you also have 4 Magna medium laser, an Harpoon 6-tube SRM, and 2 of those Magna small lasers. Try to keep that under control. You get 5 additional heat sinks, which is enough if you control what you're shooting, because you've got a lot more guns. You're going to be running a lot more hot. Around the same time, in our neck of the wood in the periphery, you had a lot of wild things roaming, and some people were like, yeah, well, we need to make those Banshees actually worth a darn in order to defend what we have. A bunch of those 3Es were actually taken. The AC5 was stripped off and put some medium lasers in just to compensate, and they stuck, well, what would be a big-ass sword on them. Pretty rare to see those still run around, but it's a lot more efficient than you think it is. Like I said, Stefan Amaris had more or less that design at some point during his career. When you replace it with the triple strength myomer inside of it, it's going to start hurting a whole lot when you swing that sword around and you're running a little bit hot, which you should be if you're using triple strength myomer. Quite a scary thing. I've seen some people redo that with more modern models as well, but there were enough of those that a lot of people call those the 3P models. It's at this point that we get to the fully modern Banshee. The 3S sold really well, like really, really well. House Steiner wanted to buy entire production runs of it. The Federated Sons, well, they were now very, very close to House Steiner, so they also bought a whole ton of them. So when the Starlink technology came back in, well, they jumped and decided to make a 5S model, which was going to be a little bit, well, much more expensive, but also fairly efficient. You do still use a GM380, but this time it's an XL, so it's bigger in terms of size, but lighter overall, and you've got double heat sinks, so that helps you save on some weight, and you still go to 65 kilometers per hour. Are going to see some 5S with 2 fists, and you're going to see some 5S with a fist and a gun arm. That really depends on when they were built, and also what parts were available when they were making them. The weaponry is always the same. The body kit that's a little bit different depending on the model. For weapons, it goes with a standard 2 Defiance 1001 ERPPCs and a Poland main Gauss rifle. You become a very, very good sniper. As things get dicey, you get 4 medium lasers from Defiance. You still have that 6-rack SRM, and you've got still 2 small lasers. Well, you've got tons of firepower. You've got speed, you've got armor. You're still a bit fragile because it's still a 380 XL, but it's now a very, very scary machine. By the 3060s, people really, really loved the Banshee. It had served admirably against all the clans and had been used by just about everybody at that point. So in the 3060s, they decided to make 2 new models using light engines instead of XLs. Increasing their survivability a little bit, but it's a lot heavier, so you have to balance it out. Your 6S uses an endosteel chassis, and is used as an heavy sniper. You get an LB-10X instead of the autocannon, and an heavy Gauss rifle. You keep the small laser, but you bring the armor to around 14.5 tons. It's not bad, and it's really to be used as a sniper. It's not my favorite design for a Banshee. The 7S is your more survivable version of the 5S. You have light engine, you have endo steel, you've got 15.5 tons of armor. And to make room for that, you take out one of those ERPPCs. So you're pretty much a 3S with a little bit of different setup. It's a pretty good machine overall. During the Jihad, Word of Blake took Esperis 2, and Defiance Industries had to build some Banshees for them. First and foremost, what they did was put triple strength myomer in and a hatchet. So at that point, the Banshee is a through brawler. To free up some space, it does have an XL gyro and an XL engine. You keep the original speed, but you have up to 18 tons of armor, a Guardian ECM, and a C3 slave. I'm sort of surprised it's not a C3I, but if you take out that Guardian ECM and the C3 slave, you could actually replace this with one C3I. Not a bad choice. For weapons, you have a small laser, that original LB-10X, a snub-nose PPC, an ER large laser, 2 regular and 2 ER medium laser, and a ER small laser. The reason you have such a wide variety of weapons is so you can activate that triple strength myomer by overeating just enough and keeping it as warm as you need by shooting the prerequisite number of weapons to generate that heat. Defiance was not too happy with what was going on, and they moved a lot of their production to Kwanjongni during the Jihad, and they started building Banshees there as well to counter the Blakeist forces. There they built the 9S, which has a top speed of 55 kilometers per hour again, with a smaller light engine and an XL gyro again, in order to maximize the weapon load. You actually have quite a bit here with an heavy PPC, a light PPC, and a Gauss rifle. If things get dicey, once again, you get 3 ER medium laser and a standard medium laser. Not sure why it's not 4 of all of them, but never mind that. And you've got that 6-tube SRM as well. To make sure the weapons actually hit, you get a advanced targeting computer, and the Gauss and ammo is protected by case, and that 18 tons of armor as well. Those make pretty decent mechs in the end. The most recent offering from Defiance is the 12S, which takes the development of the Banshee a little bit further. It also features Defiance entry into the clan grade technology for the engine with a clan 380XL engine from GM still. It's just a tiny bit smaller. You get 4 ER medium lasers and an ER small laser that are also to clan standard, so you get more punch out of them. Your main guns are still Intersphere standard, unfortunately, so we got 2 ER PPC and a Gauss rifle. It's not bad, but if they were clan grade, the PPCs would hit a little bit harder, they'd be a little bit lighter, and that Gauss rifle would be a whole lot lighter. And this is all used in tandem with the standard traditional 6-tube SRM that you have on those 3S evolutions, basically. This is a really scary machine, and like I said, if you clan graded everything on it, I think it would probably rival some of the better clan mechs out there. Okay, so I did clan grade everything on it. I wanted to play with the numbers. It's not something that's going to be in production anytime soon, mind you. But we're looking at a machine that goes up to 60 kilometers per hour. I stuck a mask on it so it can go up to 80 some odd kilometers per hour, which is pretty fast for a 95-ton mech. For equipment, well, I'm a bit packed here, as you can see. But we've got that Gauss rifle, a Streak 6 SRM. We've got the same amount of ammo, so 2 tons of Gauss and 1 ton of SRM. A small pulse and an ER small laser, just because that's the kind of weight that I was allowed to play with. 4 medium lasers, well, ER clan medium lasers, and a pair of ER PPC, one which is equipped with a capacitor. I didn't have the room to put a capacitor on both of them, and I was already running extensively odd at 66 marks out of 34 dissipation. So you don't want to be shooting everything full power, but you're going to be able to shoot quite a few things at a very good range. And you also have maximum armor, or at least a decent amount of armor for a mech its size. I'm honestly looking at this, and I'm also looking at an executioner, and I'd buy this thing 100 times before I'd buy an executioner. My expectations is that we're going to see what I've just done right now come out as the 13S or something like this in a very near future, or if Clan Wolf decides to take over Esperus. The Banshee might have started its life as a weird second-line platform, but it's grown in popularity over time, and nowadays it's probably one of those machines that they can't keep in stock anywhere. The 95-ton range is also not a range that is filled with all sorts of things, and actually good 95-tonner mechs are not that common. You've got the Nightstar, which is a very nice command mech with very good sniping ability. You've got the Omnimech Turkina, which is a totem mech for Clan Jade Falcon, and you've got the L-Star, which is a awesome on steroids. But those are the exceptions, not the rules. I would put very good money down that we're going to be getting more techs that need to specialize in the Banshee as things keep going, and that we're going to have more people bringing in Banshees, more and more modern kinds as time goes on. And I even expect those Blakist Banshees to still be in production somewhere, or at least people keeping them in very good form, especially for things like Solaris matches or trials, if some of the clans want to start smashing people with hatchets. So I thank you very much for listening to me for so long. I hope you guys have a nice rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.